The United States men's national team lose to Mexico in the Gold Cup final. Stefan Frei suffers a grisly injury in MLS action. And just what is going on with Alexi Lalas? That and more on Monday's Morning Kickaround. Hello and welcome to the show. The sound of Franz Peckenpower means just the one thing. You found your way to Morning Kickaround, where we cover the world's favorite game from the world's most favoritist country, coming to you live each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm Robert Kerr, American soccer commentator. He's Jason Davis, radio extraordinaire. How you doing here on Monday, Mr. Davis?
I could be better if the United States had managed to win a Gold Cup last night. Rob, I would be a little bit better today on a Monday. But such as it is, we get to talk about soccer. We're going to dive into some very fascinating topics today. I also know that you had an eventful lower league weekend, maybe not the one you wanted. So we're going to get into some stuff today.
Yeah, interesting weekend in the rearview mirror and plenty of stuff to look forward to here this morning. But yeah, crazy long weekend, but you did a little something a little different last night. You did a live reaction to the Gold Cup final. So if you didn't see that, you were sleeping last night, check out Jason, his hottest of takes right after the final whistles last night. Thank you to the super thanks that came in due to that video. That is one of the ways to support the show with a super thanks. You can do so during this live show right now. And you can also, without any cost to you, subscribe. Just hit the button. Doesn't cost you a darn thing. Helps us out a ton. We are just 6 away from 2,800 subscribers here. So that number's ticking up and that helps us a ton. So maybe during this live episode of Morning Kickaround, we could hit 2,800 subscribers. You want to kick it up a notch? You can become a member. MK Ultras for $3.99 a month. You can get priority access to commenting, early access to videos, bonus content, and probably the crown jewel of it, you get access to the Morning Kickaround Discord server, which lit up pretty good over this holiday weekend. Yeah. We got local stuff, MLS, people talking Club World Cup, national team, lots of threads, soccer conversations from top to bottom of our American soccer world. Any other ways to support? Yes, coffee.com/morning kickaround is there. It's a separate way to support. You can name your own contribution or contribution type. And we have a goal there of $3,000 to get a live in-person on-site visit. You have the better words for this. A live in-person Morning Kickaround. There's a budget there for travel to get us there for the goal of doing a show on location. You can also follow along on social media, X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. The handle is @mkickaround. You can write us an email, morningkickaround@gmail.com. And you can find us as a podcast, Morning Kickaround, on your favorite podcast platform. All right, let's do it. Let's kick some long balls on Monday's Morning Kickaround. This is Morning Kickaround. These are the long balls leading us here on Monday, the day after the Gold Cup final. USA lost 2-1 to Mexico. So Mauricio Pochettino's team came into this tournament on shaky ground, having not done so well in the Nations League. The warm-up friendlies were a bit of a nightmare, but they made it all the way to the final, but lost. What would you say are the silver linings of Gold Cup 2024 for the United States?
Wow. Do you feel like, before I dive into my silver linings, do you feel like we have to work too hard to find them, Rob, or do you think they're pretty surface level, the silver linings for this?
I think there's one easy one. You talked about it in your live reaction. There's one easy silver lining, that Chris Richards is a center back that we could probably feel comfortable about being in the World Cup roster next year. After that, one of my bullet points was Diego Luna. I want to talk about, previously in this tournament, people were very high. He maybe didn't have the best final performance. What I want to see if that like fades his silver lining. But Chris Richards is the one that smacks you in the face. The other ones are maybe a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, Chris Richards was excellent for most of the tournament. Obviously, scored the goal last night in a loss. It's not about goal scoring for him. It's a lot of things. I said this on social media. Maybe I was caught up in the moment, but I would love to know what the ultras think about this. I think he's on a track to be the best player in CONCACAF, and I think by the time we get to the World Cup, we probably could say that relatively confidently. Now, he needs to have another good season in England. It kind of requires some of the guys who have been in that conversation recently to not be quite as good. I mean, if Alphonso Davies has the best possible season he can, it will be a conversation as to whether or not he's still the best player in CONCACAF. I will hold up my hand and say that. But right now, Chris Richards, excellent. And, it stinks as a national team fan to come out of this tournament, to come out of 8 games total with the friendlies and the games in the Gold Cup, and really only have that, right? To only have, we've got a guy who maybe is a locked-on starter to be a center back, the national team level, the senior A squad for the next couple of years, at least, with a World Cup coming. Because we wanted so much more from this summer, didn't we, Rob? We wanted Pulisic to be there and Weah to be there and McKennie and all these guys. And obviously, it was a number of things that conspired against Pochettino to keep that team from being formed that way. But man, it's almost like, why even bother? Why even bother looking for silver linings when we missed out on this opportunity a year from the World Cup? But I keep telling myself, and I think we need to keep doing this for each other. A year is a long time.
Yep.
What's happening now is not necessarily going to inform what this team looks like in 2026. Morocco didn't look great the year before they went in and made a semifinal at a World Cup.
Yeah.
Just pointing that out. The U.S. men's national team is not going to get grouped because they failed to win a Gold Cup against Mexico with this group of players. Like, don't make those connections. That's not where we're at.
Yeah, in that game last night. So to put us in the mindset of where we were after the Nations League, that didn't go well, obviously, coming in 4th of 4 teams in that competition in the spring. So that put like an unusual onus on the Gold Cup, with it being, the next competition between, that and the biggest one of all. So it was either going to be the most stacked lineup that the USA could have, or, a lot of the time there are Gold Cup withdrawals. It's not always the A+ team. So which would it be? It turned out to be the latter. We were all disappointed. There was a lot of hubbub. Who's here, not there. Silver linings. Chris Richards, good. We saw some depth. We have some fullback. We know a little bit about our fullback depth. Berhalter could be midfield depth. And then also, to your point, skipping around a little bit, but to your point of like anyone can, like, anything can change in a year. Like Ajamang, not in the picture a year ago. Will there be another person?
Yeah, okay, but let me address this. You brought up Diego Luna. Let's slow down a bit on Diego Luna. Okay, I love his attitude. I think he's got some talent. I think that in the right situation he can be effective. But Diego Luna, 21, couple of years as a pro, playing in Major League Soccer, is not a savior for the U.S. men's national team. Can he be a depth piece? Can he be an option off the bench? Can he maybe be a spot starter against certain competition? Absolutely. But I'm going to need to see a lot more growth before I'm like, Diego Luna has to be in our starting lineup. And I know we all talk in extremes when we hit social media. Again, I declared Chris Richards the best player in CONCACAF last night. You don't get rewarded for being like meek and in the middle. But Diego Luna is not there yet. And last night is an example of why he's not there yet. He was kind of marked out of the game. He didn't have much of an impact. Malik Tillman, who had been the star of the show, attacking wise for the United States into that match. Did you notice a lot from Malik Tillman last night, Rob? Did he influence the game in major ways that made you think, oh, that's our guy? You know what? It's okay that Gio Reyna's not playing and doesn't look like he's going to get at that level again for the World Cup because we got Malik Tillman. Maybe Tillman grows at Leverkusen and brings it at that level. But that game is not an example of why Malik Tillman needs to be in the starting lineup for the U.S. men's national team moving forward. Sebastian Berhalter is a depth. Okay, I'll give you that one. Sure, why not? Neither one of those fullbacks should be in the picture for 2026. I'm sorry. I like Max Arfston. He does nice things on the attacking end of the field. Alex Freeman's not ready yet. He's still a young player, still a new pro. Give these guys some time. I mean, that's the thing. Like, we are digging. Now we are kind of going deeper to try to find things. Is Matt Freese our number one off of a Gold Cup performance, Rob? I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, that one becomes even murkier. Shout out to Nate in the chat, one of our MK Ultras. You want to get an MK Ultra, $3.99 a month, get you into there. Lots of all sorts of benefits we talked about already. But Nate saying that he would rather see Luna than Aronson. Aronson, a lot of hustle, not a lot of technicality. Luna, maybe the converse of that, but definitely gets the blood pumping a little bit more. But as far as the game specifically itself, you kind of saw the difference there. You saw the players that we were excited for, the Lunas and the Tillmans, like what can they do, got marked out. But the Mexican players, look who the goal scorers were. Those were some of Mexico's best players, biggest stars.
Yes.
Raul Jimenez scoring that goal. That was probably the biggest piece of like differentiation of the skill from the good players to the legit A+ starter players. Just that little bit of difference. And aging Tim Ream getting beaten to that by a striker returning to full force after he's had a long injury. And you could just tell that was just one of the small visual examples of just that level of sharpness and level of technical quality. I think quality is the word I'm looking for. There was just that level of quality, just put them over the top. Whereas the USA, when they had to dig deep, come back, they never really had someone that, had that just decisive edge on the defense for Mexico.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. And again, like it sounds like we're making excuses when we say things like, well, Mexico had Raul Jimenez and Edson Alvarez and all of these guys that would be starting in a World Cup game tomorrow if Javier Aguirre had to pick a team. And the United States didn't have most of our starters. And by the way, Tyler Adams, not real good last night. Not the passing is
the midfield passing ability was woeful, I would say. If there was an embarrassing or a sloppy part where you could just, because ESPN, if you look at ESPN FC's, they just say sloppy U.S. men's national team loses to Mexico again. And I would say that the sloppy part of that, the passing out of the midfield just went nowhere at all.
Yes, right. There were lots of problems there that didn't get sorted out as the game unfolded. And, maybe if Johnny Cardoso, who hasn't always brought it to the national team level, maybe if he gets the chance to play, the game is different. I don't know. I mean, again, maybe Yunus Musa, who was originally on this roster but had to pull out due to personal reasons, maybe he makes a difference. We don't know. I mean, we're kind of down on some of these guys. Johnny, we shouldn't be because of his club situation, except he doesn't bring it for the national team at the level that he did for Real Betis. Yunus Musa's had a rough go of things at AC Milan. Would he be good enough to be a factor for the U.S. men's national team in a Gold Cup final like that? I mean, again, these are all what ifs, and we can do this all day, right? Well, the bottom line is that team wasn't good enough to beat Mexico, except there was obviously a controversial moment. And shout out to Nate again. Can we talk about the mega handball no call? We will get to that. It's a major part of our show today, Rob. Let's move on.
Yeah, long ball number 2. We will get to that handball later in the show, like Jason said. But long ball number 2, MLS did play some games over the weekend, and probably the standout moment, unfortunately, MLS legend goalkeeper for Seattle Sounders, Stefan Frei, injured in the closing moments in a 1-1 draw against Columbus last night. There was a free kick. He came out to claim the ball, collided with another player, and as the group cleared, notably Stefan Frei, motionless on the ground, getting goosebumps just even talking about it. It was a pretty grisly scene. Game was just called off. It was so close. It was probably the last action of the game. They just called it off as a 1-1 draw. Thankfully, somehow, it didn't look like it last night when the news came out about this incident. But according to Stefan Frei's personal Instagram account, he's home, well, and resting. But really scary stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you hate to see that. The result feels immaterial on some level, but obviously, a 1-1 draw between two teams that have designs on trophies this season. I know Wilfred Nancy, basically said when something like that happens, the game doesn't matter. Like, you're not focused on winning the match at that point. And I know this happened late enough that you're sort of like, well, the game ended. Well, actually it was sort of like an agreed abandonment at that point. I mean, they blew the whistle full time, but it was kind of like Nancy and the crew were saying, nah, we don't need to get him off the field and then have a game that keeps going after that. Nobody feels like continuing play. And there have been moments recently in soccer There was that NWSL situation. A game continued after a player collapsed. Obviously, that's a little different. I mean, both scary. One of them sort of related to the action of the game. In this case, was Stefan Frei. One of them not. And I think that if you're a player, the one that feels scarier is the thing that happens that you have no control, that nobody was involved with. That just a player goes down. Oh my God, what's going on? But in that situation, the NWSL took a ton of heat for continuing the game. Again, I know there was not much time left. Very little time left on the clock, probably immaterial. But I do think the spirit was there, and I think it's worth pointing out, even if it didn't really make a ton of difference in terms of the result of the game.
Shout out to Crispy Dewey 44, new member, new MK Ultra, been in the chat quite a bit, a regular viewer. Thank you for making the commitment and jumping in to becoming a MK Ultra and becoming a member of the Morning Kickaround channel. Back to the topic at hand. With these things, you always fear the worst, especially when you see someone carted off of the playing field with no motion and all that stuff. You don't expect to have like the best possible outcome, but just from, getting any sort of report, the fact that he's home and he's not like in the hospital or paralyzed or some sort of like serious, lifelong affecting condition is a miracle of sorts, and glad to hear that news that he's okay. But just wanted to update Stefan Frei okay after a grisly scene in Seattle last night in Major League Soccer. Do you have any other MLS news before we move on?
I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that there were games this weekend, just as there have been for a number of weeks while other things are happening in the world of American soccer. And this weekend with the final, because I am so U.S. men's national team focused, right? Because my fandom as an American soccer fan blossomed from my fandom for the U.S. men's national team. It was hard for me to pay attention to anything else but a Gold Cup final. It didn't matter that most of the American stars weren't there. It was USA-Mexico. It was a final. It was an opportunity to see that rivalry play out again. I was living and dying with it. Probably the most consistent thing in my life as a sports fan now, having kind of moved on from some other sports because soccer has enveloped my entire being, Rob, is my hatred of Mexico when it comes to soccer matches between the United States and Mexico. I mean, I root for the United States and I hate Mexico. These are things about me. It'll probably be my tombstone, right? Like please beat L3 again is what I'm going to need on my tombstone for my epitaph. I didn't really get a chance to dig into Major League Soccer, right? I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention this weekend. I know that, there was an Inter Miami story this weekend. They destroyed Montreal. Who's bad? What does that mean for Miami going forward after their Club World Cup experience? Because they're back into MLS play. We are watching to see, I think, what's going to happen in LA with Steve Cherundolo. Is he going to stick around much longer, or is there potentially a change coming? Now, they didn't play this weekend, right? Or they had their game postponed against Austin on Saturday. So in terms of where MLS is, getting my head back into it is sort of the thing. FC Cincinnati wins the game. We're looking at the table now. Well, obviously, Philadelphia is trying to maintain that spot, a chance at a Supporter Shield. They lose to Nashville. What is BJ Callahan and Nashville making their push? They're now into second place ahead of Philadelphia in the Eastern Conference. I'm like, oh, look at this. This is fascinating. Lots of things are happening.
Lots of things are happening indeed. Moving on to long ball number 3, with things, a lot of action, a lot of competitions happening. Club World Cup, they're playing as well. The semifinals are set after quarterfinals play to completion. Curious to throw it out there is who's all watching this still. Club World Cup, historically, the teams that were in it, I mean, it was much smaller. The teams that are in it cared, but no one else really seemed to. Obviously, it's expanded, so more teams are involved. So, if they're in it, more fan bases are involved, more teams cared. But now that it's being parsed down to, the final 4, who's all watching this still? Is this getting more serious? Are you ramping up your excitement, or is it tapering off because there's less, unique matchups and different teams that we don't often see?
That's where I'm at. Now, I'm not going to say I'm speaking for everybody. I'm sure there are American soccer fans who are very much still engaged with this competition, right? I'm sure there are people that are like, oh, it's awesome. We may get, Rob, imagine this. We may get a Champions League winner against the Conference League winner in the final of the Club World Cup. What could be more exciting than that? I mean, I don't know. I do see the value, and I've talked about this before, right? I've seen the value of there being those unique matchups, of there being an opportunity to see teams that don't usually get to play one another. And that is largely in the story of this tournament, it's been South America versus Europe, right? We've seen some Asian teams. We had Al Hilal, give Al Hilal credit for the run that they made and the upset that they pulled off against Manchester City. Massive part of this story. But that kind of, and we do have one left. I mean, let's not pretend like Fluminense versus Chelsea isn't fascinating. It is. And maybe Fluminense makes a final and we do get South America versus Europe.
And that would be the best case scenario,
for me as a neutral. As a neutral, that would be the best case scenario. I think if you're FIFA, you want Chelsea versus one of the European powers, PSG or Real Madrid. I think that's what you want. I don't think you want Fluminense. As much as Fluminense has been a story, and as much as their fans have been a story in this tournament, as much as Brazilian support has been a story in this tournament, I think if you're talking about global viewers and all the things that FIFA's trying to drive here, you want Chelsea versus Real Madrid, Chelsea versus PSG. Probably Chelsea versus Real Madrid, because Real Madrid is the monster, right? They are the biggest club left here. So I don't know. I mean, in terms of the quality of the play, watching back that PSG Bayern game, surface maybe not the best. Manuel Neuer makes some great saves, makes some howlers in terms of distribution, and then slips on the Doué shot that eventually gives PSG the victory. Yeah, I don't know. That I don't think was a great advertisement for the tournament, what it's supposed to be, because it wasn't ideal in terms of the situation there in Atlanta.
And in some regards, this competition, the performance on the field hasn't been as necessarily as important as the names involved, it seems like, at least on the presentation style. Like, that is a Champions League, a UEFA Champions League quarterfinal matchup, PSG versus Bayern, I believe. And I think just getting those matchups, the volume of that is what they're looking for. Is like, hey, shiny two names, watch this. But you're saying that maybe some of the quality of it wasn't necessarily up to par, but that's kind of how this whole competition's been, because they're tired. Would you say anyone's peak? There's been, to be fair, PSG, some of their games, they have looked just about, their full PSG strength, but they even had some howlers. I think they lost one of the games in the group stage because they looked completely hot and out of energy. So you wouldn't say this competition has had like peak, the best teams in the world. Some of the best teams in the world are here, at least. But would you say we've seen the best football in the world during this competition? I feel like you'd really have to be digging at scraps to think that like we saw peak of the sport at the club level.
Yeah, no, look, okay, you're right. Like, I guess it is sort of like what FIFA was trying to accomplish outside of making money, because we know that, right? This is about making money for FIFA.
Dancing around that a bit, yeah.
If you are going to give them credit for creating a competition that is meant to put on display teams from around the world, rather than sort of, and again, FIFA's play here is we can do something UEFA can't, which is bring in the Brazilian teams and the Asian teams and teams from around the globe and make it more interesting that way, make it more of a celebration of football, a la the World Cup, right? That's what they're trying to replicate here. Now, I think the dynamics are clearly different because all Brazilians root for one national team. All Brazilians don't root for the same club teams. That's going to be a hard sell. So you're not like, it's not like Botafogo fans are suddenly like, Fluminense, go win it. Some might, I guess, but there's probably not a lot of solidarity there when you play them in the league and you want to beat them every time, and Botafogo reigning champions and all those things. So I guess your point is, if it's not about the best soccer, like if it's not about putting on display the best quality of soccer, then it's about the competition. It's about the spirit of it. It's about the desire to prove yourself world champion if you do get a chance to go up against teams like Botafogo or Fluminense or Palmeiras or whatever. And I guess we have seen that. I do think it's very easy to be reductively negative and say like, oh, because it's PSG and Real Madrid and because it could be Chelsea and one of those teams, it's boring because it's just like Europe. But it hasn't been. It hasn't been just like Europe leading up to this. It has been fascinating. It has been interesting. You mentioned Botafogo beating PSG. I'm sure a lot of people didn't have that because it was the assumption that the European champion would be able to beat any team that they face, even a good Brazilian one. And that kind of leaves out the ability to take into account how tired are the European players, how in form are the South American players, how do the surfaces in various places, especially indoors where they've laid down some grass over turf, or in Seattle where they laid down grass over turf. How does that affect it? How do the atmospheres affect this? How does the weather? We've had weather delays in this thing, right? So all of that, how does the heat affect this? All of that is I do think that if you're being kind to the competition, you're right, Rob. You can kind of find some unique things about it.
Yeah, there's some quirks here and there. And I remind you guys that this is an interactive show. We are working towards becoming a town square, so to speak, of American soccer conversation. Parker Smith, conundrum of rooting for an upset. Very fun in the match at hand, but usually leaves you with a following match that's a bit less exciting than two better teams going at it.
Well, okay, let me address that because shout out to Parker, who's a MK Ultra and a member. Be like Parker. So in the sense of if you're talking about the knockout phase, right, and whether this has been for some people less interesting in the knockout phase than it was in the group phase because you've had a little less variety in terms of where the teams come from. Unfortunately, I do think this is unfortunate. One side of the bracket broke out completely European. Right. You had Flamengo losing to Bayern. You had Monterrey losing to Dortmund. You had Miami losing to PSG, all in that round of 16. So you ended up with European teams moving on to the quarterfinals, European teams in the semi now with PSG and Real Madrid. On the other side, like we had Fluminense beat Inter Milan. That's, hey, again, Inter Milan may have fallen apart a bit after their Champions League final appearance. Their manager may have run off to go coach in Saudi Arabia, but that's still notable that Fluminense beat and again, obviously Al Hilal beating Manchester City in a wild 4-3 game. Like that should be enough of a selling point to say that's what the tournament's supposed to be. There we go. Let's move on.
And some other interesting things. We're like stuck in our bubble here in the United States. I'm curious, like looking outside of our own perspective of this. I've seen some English coverage of it saying that, when Premier League the whole like floating thing, like will Premier League or any other big European leagues play an actual in-league game in the United States? And I've seen that conversation from talking heads overseas saying that, like, of course they would. They pack out all the stadiums for all these exhibitions. Of course they'd love it. But after this competition, I feel like the kind of not necessarily just because you put a European team in America, it's going to sell out no matter what. I think that take has been dispelled. But I wanted to go back to the very beginning of the comments. Andy, one of our regular viewers, he was overseas in Colombia, and he said the Club World Cup was on every bar's TV, Gold Cup available to a degree. I thought that was interesting that, like, places outside of our shores, maybe a little bit more tuned in. Maybe we're a little bit more cynical than maybe some others on this.
Admittedly. And I don't want to, what's the phrase? Yuck anybody's yum. Like, I don't want to sit here and be like, you shouldn't like this thing because it's whatever cynical reason I find not to like it. Everybody it has the right to come to this on their own terms. And you don't even have to like factor FIFA and Johnny Infantino into it if you don't want to. For its own sake, the Club World Cup has been entertaining. I just wish I had been able to give it more attention because it happened with all these other things going on, Rob. And it was just so the soccer was so thick this summer. It's like the humidity around here in DC. It's like, all right, it's a lot of soccer right now.
Yeah, feast or famine. What are we going to do in August? I mean, we've been trying to like tig through multiple competitions, and now we're going to have to figure something out. And like, there's a women's Euros that started. I haven't watched any of that I normally would due to the density. And one final note from the comments, Andy, again, Club World Cup reminds them that technically only 8 stadiums are World Cup ready. And I don't know, is that true? Have we, between the Gold Cup and the Club World Cup, I would say we're not exactly like 100% ready at these places, it seems.
Yeah, I think there's some things there. I can't speak to that specifically in a lot of places. Again, I know we're doing the sod over the turf. I think it's going to be different slightly, and hopefully better installed. I don't know if that's the right word. They're spending a lot of money. I mean, I know in Seattle because of my friend Jeremiah O'Shan, who runs Sounder at Heart, they laid down the grass on top of the turf, and then they're going to take it out. They're going to pull it right back up, and then next year, we're going to do this all over again. It's been wild.
Yeah, Club World Cup. So we're in the semifinal stage. Fluminense versus Chelsea on Tuesday, and a PSG versus Madrid Wednesday. The final to come on Sunday night. If you're watching this and if you haven't hit subscribe yet, do so now. Join the close to 2,800 folks who are members, subscribers of Morning Kickaround. If you want to kick your support of this channel up a notch, $3.99 a month, become an MK Ultra. I saw somebody in the chat discovered kind of the origins of what MK Ultra, kind of the origin of that thread is, and he prefers the soccer version, as do we. Just a little fun there. But when you become a member, you get early access to videos, you get priority commenting on the live streams. And one of the best features is you get access to the Morning Kickaround Discord server that has threads on subjects from local soccer, MLS, the men's national team, women's national team, and just general topics. And I've really been enjoying the intros. It's almost like Soccerholic sort of opening up like, hi, I'm Robert. I'm a Soccerholic. I watch 20 games a week. Please help me. But those have been really fun. MK Ultras, thank you for, enriching that conversation there.
I do appreciate this, and I can speak to this in a different context. So when I was doing my very American soccer-focused radio show, The United States of Soccer on SiriusXM, and RIP to that show, I do miss doing it. In the beginning of that show, I get a lot of people who would call and give me their bio, give me their entire resume. Like, I was born here, and I played the game there, and I was at this level, and I know this, I watched this tournament, and look, eventually I kind of like got, okay, I thank you,
Copy that.
Mr. English guy who moved to America in 1963. Thank you for telling me your story. But I do appreciate, especially for American soccer fans, and especially for those of us for whom it wasn't a thing passed down from our family. And that would be my case. Not yours, Robert, but in my case, my parents knew jack crap about soccer. They put me in it when I was 8 years old, and here we are. Now I got to pass it on to my kids.
Tip of the cap, first gen Socceroos here.
There you go.
Soccerista. Well, anyway, hit subscribe, become a member. You can support on ko-fi.com/Morning Kickaround. We got some very specific goals there. You can follow on social media at mkickaround on X, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com, or find us as a podcast, Morning Kickaround, and your favorite podcast platform. All right, we're going to take a sip of our drinks, come right back, and talk about American soccer being weird here on Morning Kickaround. Welcome in to American Soccer is Weird here on Morning Kickaround. I'm Robert. He's Jason. And with the Gold Cup being on Fox Sports, we've seen a lot of Alexi Lalas. He's always been very antagonistic, but it seems like he's turned it up a notch this summer. You have some thoughts, Mr. Davis?
Yeah, first let's see what Alexi was up to yesterday in Houston. This is Alexi Lalas astride is that a horse or a pony? I don't know the difference. Rob, are you up on your equine differences? Do you know?
I just know I think that's a horse, but it's not the biggest horse.
It's not the biggest horse. I can appreciate that Alexi maybe isn't a veteran horse rider. Like, maybe he's not an equestrian, but this does look like he's at the fair and daddy paid $3 for him to take a ride. Let's just say that, right? Okay. I'm just saying that. He was wearing his hat. This was like a thing on the broadcast yesterday. Now, I will say that I did not engage with what he said on television. I was doing radio before the game. When I started watching the game, I ended up watching in Spanish. I did not engage with Fox yesterday for the match. I know this was on the over the air Big Fox. It's not on Fox Sports. It was on the Big Fox, which means a bigger platform for somebody like Alexi Lalas. And okay, let me also say, full disclosure, I would call myself at this point an acquaintance of Alexi. I don't know that I would call him a friend at this point in my life, but there have been times when I would have called Alexi Lalas a friend of mine, that I would have said, hey, my friend Alexi. And the other part of this is I probably wouldn't be sitting here, or things might have been different for my soccer broadcasting career if not for Alexi Lalas. He has been very kind. He's done a lot of things. But we need to talk about what's going on here, because I think maybe people are maybe people do have an idea of what's going on, but all they care about is that Alexi is doing these things. I'm sure there are people who kind of agree with the line that Alexi is taking, which is largely political these days. I mean, even in a soccer context, Alexi is finding ways to be political. And I know that he has posted about his choices when it comes to candidates and things like that. And I don't know if Alexi would take any issue with this. I don't think he would, because he's very clear about this. Alexi is putting on a show, right? He's putting on a show, and in the sense that this may not be 100% who Alexi Lalas is when he takes off his microphone and goes home at night. And I have seen Alexi. I'm not going to tell you anything he told me privately or anything like that, but I have been out to dinner with Alexi Lalas when he is off. When the Alexi Lalas American soccer guy thing is not happening, and it's a very different person. And a lot of us are like just to kind of give you my perspective. I'm doing a show right now. This is not exactly who Jason Davis is when I step away. When I'm on the radio, that's not exactly the same Jason Davis that talks to my wife or my kids, or even like I might even say things occasionally that I don't 100% come to naturally, that are maybe meant to foster a conversation. But Alexi takes that to the extreme. Alexi is somebody who says, this is a show. I am a showman. I will say things. I will do things to foster a conversation. And honestly, you can see this very much in the context of, I don't know, a Howard Stern or somebody like that, Rob, right? Or really any of the political pundits out there right now who are kind of everywhere in society and media, right? Some of them may really truly hold whatever opinions they're espousing, but a lot of them probably don't, or they don't think about it that deeply. They say things to get themselves attention. And Alexi, this is not, I'm not even telling tales out of school here. Alexi is on the record saying that if somebody wants to give him the opportunity to be a talking head, a political pundit, to be on television all the time, or to be on a podcast making millions of dollars through Spotify or whatever, he would happily take it. That's his end goal. His end goal with the World Cup coming, Alexi Lalas sees his runway to maybe being that guy, right? To being ubiquitous, to being Stephen A. Smith, Rob. That's what he wants to be. He wants to be Stephen A. Smith. And that's everything. You have to see everything through that prism. It doesn't mean you can't hate the guy if you don't like his opinions. It doesn't mean that you can't have negative responses to what he does. But remember that you are feeding the beast when you respond that way. If you post on social media, look at this idiot Alexi Lalas, look at this cowboy hat, look at this terrible opinion, you are doing exactly what he wants you to do, Rob.
Yeah, and here we are. I mean, that's the thing, but I'm glad you're acknowledging it, because like I said, we've been watching a lot of Alexi this summer with the Gold Cup here, and there's only more to come next summer with the World Cup on our shores, and lots of teams, lots of games. So there's going to be a ton of coverage, and Fox doesn't really expand their panel too much. He's going to be on there almost around the clock.
I will say that Marisa Dew is a good addition. I will say that I think the jury is out a little bit on Landon Donovan. I don't know that his in-game work is as good, but I do think that when he's on the panel, when he's providing his perspective, he can be pretty good. There are lots of, we can get very in the weeds on how we want our soccer presented in America. And not everybody is in the same lane in terms of how we want to see this, right? There is a very distinct group of people, especially those attuned to the Premier League, who thinks that NBC does it best. that NBC does it the way it should be done. They treat the game seriously. It's all very we're taking this. We have Robbie Musto, and we have whoever else is on the. But Tim Howard is giving this very kind of staid approach to discussing it, and that feels, I don't know, English, I guess, is the right way to say it. I don't know how you would kind of what category you would put that in. That is a particular way of doing things, even though the English have their own.
I would
version.
say there's a lot more reverence in there, reverence and analytical, whereas the Fox goes very much emotional and reactionary.
But then you also have, with several English people on the panel, you also have what Paramount and CBS do around their Champions League coverage, right? Which a lot of people point to that and go, well, they're just trying to be the NBA show from TNT, right? They're just trying to replicate those vibes. Micah Richards being this cartoon character on television. And that is all of that is kind of more in the, we're having a fun time. We're not going to, this is all goof. This is all being crazy. This is all taking cracks at one another. This is all what you would get with your mates in a pub, right? Or your friends in a bar, if we want to be American about it. Well, then Alexi and what Fox does is sort of taking some elements of that and adding just in the bombastic American approach to sports, right? It's sports talk radio on television, for lack of a better way of describing it. And I grew up in that tradition, and I grew up in that with that ideal as to what sports are supposed to be. I mean, I got to where I am in part because I listened to so much radio and internalized all. Now I have my own approach, and I think that I have found for me, and maybe other people would disagree, but I think I found a middle ground between the being bombastic and being crazy and saying things just to get a rise out of people, and being smart and analytic and being reasonable with my takes on various topics. But this is an era when hot takes sell. They do. Again, you just need to look at Stephen A. Smith in terms of somebody from sports who has now flipped that into something bigger and better for himself, and wonder if that's what Alexi is chasing. And he's on the record as saying he would happily take those opportunities. I think he told John Arand on a podcast. John Arand does business of sports stuff. And I think Alexi said something like that. Like, I would happily take that opportunity to be the Stephen A. Smith, to be the next one.
Well, to your point, I mean, he doesn't really say no to a whole lot of things, but in the air of, talk sports radio, like the second guy, I got to be the opposite opinion, right? No matter what. So Alexi Lalas, maybe he's good for American soccer. There's a lot of times where there wasn't any American soccer coverage really. So a loud voice had to kind of maybe fill in the gaps between tournaments or between the marquee moments when the general populace looks at soccer. So people that are general sports and maybe NFL, NBA, they don't know anything about soccer, but they, connect American soccer and Alexi Lalas, and he's maybe dragged American soccer through those dark times before there was Galazos, or there was the NBC Sports. And to your point, you're saying he gave, kind of paved the way or assisted in some way of you getting to where you are. Yeah. So maybe there's but at the same time, it's not that necessary now. Does he really have to drag it? Does he have to drag American soccer to the mainstream like he once did 10 years ago?
So maybe you're asking a question of whether or not we need Alexi Lalas. And I think that's I don't know that that's his consideration, right? I'm not saying he's 100% selfish in everything he does, but this is the job, right? This is his career. This is his, again, whatever he wants, whatever his ego is kind of pushing him towards, right? And we all have one. Right. Like if we did at some point on Morning Kickaround, where I sat down and I've had discussions about my career with other people, and we did like a, inside the actor's studio, only it was inside the dumb soccer guy's studio with me, Jason Davis. And you were asking me questions about how I view my job and how I approach it and all that stuff. I would probably have similar thoughts as to what is driving Alexi Lalas. It's just how far you're willing to go in the quest to meet those goals. Rob. Now it's also about talent and about likability or popularity or who cares about, like, just because I'd go Alexi Lalas or I go big or I start yelling all the time doesn't mean I'm going to get a lot more attention and make a lot more money. But there are people who buy into that theory. The louder you are, the more provocative you are, the more aggressive you are, the more you walk the lines. Okay. And I'm going to bring in a message here, a chat from FC Neo Tokyo. Beyond idiotic, dude's a grifter and POS. Like he literally tried to blame U.S. men's national team losses on the fact we let brown and black people on the team. No. He did not say that.
Yeah, was that implication?
But what he did say, this is Alexi knowing what he's doing, walking a line, riling people up on purpose, while also being careful not to say the literal thing that FC Neo Tokyo says he said, which is that brown and black people are the problem. That's not what he said. What he said was that maybe diversity hurts our national team because it means we have all these disparate ways of playing and we can't bring it all together. And look, if you watch that game last night and you watch how Mexico plays, all of those Mexican players grow up in Mexican soccer playing Mexican football, and they look like a team who play the same way from the moment they start kicking a ball at 4 or 5 years old to the moment they're on the national team. That is not the case for the U.S. men's national team. It's much more of a jigsaw puzzle. Does this piece fit? What do I got to put? And I do not want our team to be less diverse. I do not want our team to give up the quest to win a World Cup with the kind of team we have. I think that would be the best way to go about this. But I think it's reasonable to ask that in the short term or in certain moments, if there's a sense of, well, we kind of make it more, or we have a more difficult level, a degree of difficulty higher in the United States with our national team than say Mexico does, or Germany does, or name any world power. And so Alexi said it in a way that I don't agree with, said in a way that feels regressive and wrong to me, but that's exactly why he said it that way. Because he knows there are people who respond emotionally rather than intellectually to it.
Yeah. Another just kind of look at the comments. There's a couple different opinions coming in here. SN Chalmers, Lalas is necessary evil to counterbalance the years of anti-soccer hatred from the American sports.
No, okay. I'm going to take issue with this. Okay. And again, I didn't play in a World Cup. I didn't drop an album in the 90s. I didn't have long red hair and a beard. I didn't do all that stuff. And Alexi's profile is much bigger than mine for that reason. And maybe that's why you would say something like that. But I'm out here, right? Somebody mentioned the Cooligans earlier. The Cooligans are out here. There are lots of people in American soccer who are pushing back against those anti-soccer hatred elements in American sports. I guess it's just a question of who the powers that be, the people in charge who have the ability to tap somebody on the shoulder and say, you get to be the guy most heard, whether they want Alexi Lalas or they want somebody else. That's what I would say about that. Right. And again, I would love for it to be me. Again, I got an ego. I chose this as my living. Of course I would love that to be me, but it doesn't have to be me. It can be somebody else, but maybe it shouldn't be Alexi Lalas anymore.
To the point of the homogeneous or the unified approach that the Mexican team had. Producer Jenny had a good. She threw in her comments saying that, like, perhaps rather than bringing that down in an ethnic way, perhaps American soccer just needs more of a one direction to pull in. You know, well, education. And are we pulling? We're not even pulling in the same way. The leagues aren't even pointing in the same direction.
Well, that's a good point. But I do think that's like herding cats, right? The problem is that it's not just about like selfish interests who are pushing us in one direction or another, or their little area, their little province, their little, people get very protective of this. It's not just that. It's also that we are always going to be a national team because of the nature of American influence around the world who have players like Malik Tillman, who have players like Yunus Musa, who have players like Anthony Robinson and Fowler and Balogun. And I could go on and on and on. And that, like, those players, some of them born in the U.S., but not raised in the U.S. in a soccer context. Some players like Ricardo Pepi, raised in a very specific soccer context, born and raised in the United States, but raised in a very specific soccer context down there in Texas, near the border with Mexico. Whereas you have other people, I grew up in Minnesota, grew up in the Northeast, grew up in Washington State. Like, how do you, part of what makes this country awesome and why I still, as a 45-year-old man, is like, I need to see more of my country, is that there are so many things and so many different cultures and so many, I've never really experienced a lot of what culture is in a lot of places. And I know it's very different than mine. And I think that's okay. I think that's part of what makes America awesome. I can recognize it makes putting together a national team that can win a title, a world championship, more difficult, but I think that should be our quest. We should take that on and want it to do it that way.
I definitely am on the same page with you there. We definitely don't want to get regressive to progress just for soccer's sakes. That's how I feel. Just
I just
within.
think it's impossible anyway. It's a non-starter. Like what Alexi said is, again, to try to get the emotional response, knowing he knows it's not possible. How would you even institute a program that's like, we need a homogeneous approach to soccer? What would that even mean? Like, you're going to say, oh, well, again, we're only going to do one section of the country? No. We're going to eliminate anybody not raised outside of the United States? No. Like, you're going to get yourself in big trouble with that, and you'd be missing out on. Never mind. Let's move on, Rob.
Thank you, everyone, for joining into the conversation here. That's what the show is all about, to try to, open up the American soccer conversation here on the show. Subscribers, we are near 2,800. We could be hitting that during the show here as we speak. We've seen a couple added today. Thank you so much for becoming an MK Ultra. Just $3.99 a month gets you priority commenting on these live videos, early access to videos, bonus content, and access to the Discord server. You can also support on ko-fi.com/morning kickaround to donate to our specific goals there. And you can also find us on social media at Morning Kickaround at X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. All right, we'll take a breath and come right back and talk about what the heck is a handball here on Morning Kickaround. So, big question here on Monday morning, July 7th, the morning after the Gold Cup final, in which the United States men's national team lost 2-1 to Mexico. But the big question of the day is, what is a handball? And this stems from, in the final last night, a Mexican player put his hand very clearly on top of a soccer ball. That's not the soccer ball, but there it is. That is a soccer ball in the penalty box with a Mexican player resting their body on it.
Everything's not working for me. My apologies. There it is.
Yeah, so there it is. That's very clear. Hard to argue that his hand is on the ball there inside the penalty area. See, note the time and the score during this. So it's a pivotal moment as well. This is not called a penalty. And Poch, in his post-game comments, called this embarrassing. What do you think? What is a handball even?
Yeah, we're going to hear Pochettino's comments. I just wanted to get the visual of this. So this is Jorge Sanchez of Mexico doing a dance move. It looks like he's breakdancing on top of the ball, right? It does. It's literally that. And it is wild to a lot of us that this is not a handball given as a penalty. Now, before we hear from Pochettino, let's be fair and bring up from IFAB. This is the IFAB website. A handball offense is not committed when a player, and there's some things that are obviously clearly not handballs, and then this part, falls and the ball hits their supporting arm, which is between their body and the ground, unless the ball goes directly into the opponent's goal, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the part that is leaving this gray area that is allowing for the referee to say, nope, it's not intentional. It's the supporting arm. He's falling. What is he going to do? Now, could he have avoided the ball with his arm? I don't have video here, Rob. So I don't know. Could he have avoided the ball? Do you believe that Jorge Sanchez could have avoided the ball and not put his hand directly on top of it, and we would not be here? This would be much clearer as to how the law of the game allows for your supporting arm to touch the ball.
Well, it's one of those things where he falls onto it, puts his hand out to block it, but it's so much ball. It's so much ball. It's not just like a grazing of it or a sloppy moment. He puts his hand on it. I think it stops spinning under his hand as well. And when I saw it, when the referee, they cut to the referee as soon as it happened, he waves it off. And I definitely let out a whoa when that happened. I was beyond belief of that is as clear a day. I can understand not calling a handball if someone rocket shots you from a foot away and it just rockets up into your arm. The old Champions League, when Liverpool got the penalty over Tottenham in the Champions League, that seemed unfair to me, even from a Liverpool fan. The guy just kicks it straight at your arm, you're running, it hits you. This guy's falling over and he puts his hand on it. It rests almost controls the ball and then moves along.
I'll be the first one to say that still does not tell the whole story. I don't love this. I'd love to have the video so you can see it, but it looks like he's staring directly at the ball and he's like, here we go. I'm going to stop the ball.
That's what I'm saying, because I feel like I was a little kid, and if I would have fallen on the ball and like stood up, putting my hand on the ball, like that's a penalty, like no matter what. Like, and accidents happen. It's like, yeah, you don't want to punish them if it's an accident, but sometimes accidents happen and you get penalized for it. Sometimes you slide tackle. You don't mean to foul the guy, but you do.
We can't get into that thing about intention, right? Intention is such a weird way to go. You can't. It's really difficult to know what intent is. Players get carded and red carded and sent off all the time when intention is questionable. They maybe didn't mean to do it. I mean, that second, to bring it back to something we talked about earlier in the show, the second red card in that PSG Bayern game in the Club World Cup, the one that Lucas Hernandez gets, he gets it because he brings his elbow up. There's maybe like a little of a smooch, a little kiss of the chin, and he gets sent off. Did he intend to do it? Man, I don't know. I don't know. How do you read that? Did Jorge Sanchez intend to put his hand on the ball? I don't know. But because I can't know, and he does it so blatantly, and this is the whole point of our game, don't touch the ball with your hands unless you're the goalkeeper, it feels as though that is outside of this. Okay, so that being said, let's bring in Mauricio Pochettino from his press conference after the game.
I'm going to say, after your question about the handball in the 66 minutes, 67 minutes in the second half, it's nothing to, I think, because you listen a song, no? When finished the game, that was llorar, cry. But I don't want to cry. I'm not going to cry. I wanted to tell the truth. The truth was that if that happened in the opposite half, in the another box, for sure it's penalty. Because we cannot talk about the rules. You say, is silly penalty? Silly penalty. It's like plenty of penalties that are so silly. Silly? Yes. The player was with the knee on the floor. He pushed the hand over the ball. It's not that the hand was on the floor and the ball touched. Okay, all the excuses now, but that was penalty, and maybe 2-1 for us, and maybe we were celebrating the trophy.
Okay, let's stop here for just a minute. That's essentially what we said, right? It's not as though Sanchez put his hand on the ground and the ball hit his hand, and that's part of the law as it's understood. He put his hand directly on the ball. His supporting arm wasn't already there, and there was some incidental contact with the ball or some unintentional contact. It was directly on the ball. And he said, I do think that Pochettino's in a very difficult spot here, Rob. He says, no llorar. Llorar means to cry, like sin llorar, without crying. But he kind of is, right? He kind of is. It's impossible not to come off like that a little bit. You agree with his assessment, though, of sort of like how egregious this looks? Again, whatever the law of the game might be.
Yeah, I do. I mean, especially from the losing coach, and you see that happened and didn't get a call for your team. There's been much smaller, every game is an isolated thing unto itself, but you've seen much lesser offenses, handball, foul, or otherwise, be deemed a penalty kick. And this is one of the most clear as day handballs as I've really ever seen, other than the Suarez blocking the shot in the 2010 World Cup or whatever it was. That was one of the clearest handballs. And this one is almost up there for me as far as oblivious or obvious rather. Your whole hand, there's not very many times where a whole entire palmed hand goes on a ball.
Yeah.
Intentional or not. I mean, you can't lie. You can't make up the fact that is hands on a ball.
I would say that it's Luis Suarez, it's Thierry Henry, and maybe it's Jorge Sanchez. Only the thing about those two other calls is that it was pretty clear they were intentionally doing what they were doing. But that's what I'm saying. We don't know if Sanchez was intentionally doing it because it's such a weird moment. All right, let's hear more from Poch.
I think that is clear. And it's not about to cry. It's not about to complain. It's not about to put excuses in the different things. But I think we can continue talking. For me, it was embarrassing to see that situation, and it's a shame because I understand that maybe 70,000 people, giving this penalty is not easy. But maybe again, or 4, maybe it's easier, no? And yes, that is what we need to learn also. Yes, I am so proud about the team.
He is saying there, Rob, that the 70,000 Mexico fans in the building at Energy Stadium in Houston, Texas, helped make that call. That's what he's saying. And look, you don't have to believe that the referee is in the pocket of Mexico or corrupt or what to think that emotionally it'd be really hard for a referee to make that call when there is any gray area at all, when you've got a whole stadium full of fans.
Yeah, he doesn't want to get showered in beer. He doesn't want to get all the projectiles thrown at him that we've seen over the years come from Mexico fans in the United States when these games happen. That's not a not an isolated incident. And yeah, I've had to volunteer as a youth referee at times, and having just a couple dozen like kind of rowdy parents yell at you can like influence you. Like, do I really want to deal with these people howling at me if I do this 50-50 call the other way? And I imagine like whether they're aware of it or not, yeah, that huge sound, that huge crowd going in the opposite way of that call, that's something like there's just like a human resistance to friction like that.
Yeah, there's that. He goes on. I'm not sure it's in this clip. Let me see if we can get to it.
Going, keep fighting, keep pushing. 1 year to the World Cup, too many positives to take.
All right, he's waiting for the next question. But he went on to say at one point, Rob, that he said, I would like to see my players playing with 70,000 people cheering. We need the people. We need the fans. The fans have 1 year to realize how important are the fans in soccer, to stay with the team, to support, not only through Instagram, social media, or through behind the TV, but also to be here and translate the energy.
Oh, I mean, you can't lie. I mean, I think statistically, home field advantage is the bigger influencer in soccer than any other sport. I think might have come out.
That might be. Yeah, I think there has been some research on that. I don't know what to say about this. Right, I've been talking and writing and covering American soccer for almost 20 years at this point, and I don't know how to kind of frame up the issue with attendance and U.S. men's national team fans and the issue of playing a Mexico in the U.S. and having it be 95% Mexico fans, or playing Guatemala in St. Louis in a semifinal and having it be 95% Guatemalan fans.
Yeah, that was unreal.
I think it's interesting. The easy place to go is to blame the fans, to blame the U.S. men's national team fans, or to blame the federation for ticket prices when they are in charge. In this case, this is CONCACAF who sets the ticket prices, not U.S. soccer. But there obviously is you can talk about like the culture is kind of set by U.S. soccer, who charges too much for games, then people don't go out, then they don't want to follow the team around for the Gold Cup. There's also obviously this issue of the strength of this squad and whether people would have showed up. If Christian Pulisic was there, would have been better, those kind of things, right? And I think the issue, of course, is sort of recognizing where we are as a soccer culture in terms of the national team support in particular. People are not culturally acclimated to following the national team around or even to going to games in the U.S. There's no rhythm to it, right, Rob? I mean, you get a Gold Cup every 2 years. That can be a thing. What I mean is, like, when you care about a local team, you buy your season tickets, or you look at the calendar, go, we're going to go to that game, we're going to go to that game, we're going to go to that game. It's kind of different with a national team program. Like it comes, national team programs, national teams are a reflection of the culture of their countries. And so when you live in a country that is so heavily populated by immigrants of any community, I mean, of any background, Guatemalan, Mexican, whatever, those people show up because they don't get other opportunities to do it, because it's their one shot, especially for Guatemala. Obviously, Mexico, this happens pretty regularly, but even then, this is as much a celebration of Mexican culture for those people as it is, I want to see the Mexican national team play. Of course, they want them to win. Of course, they're supporting L3, but they're also there because They want to be around other people who share their heritage.
It's a cultural moment rather than just a sporting event.
That's right. And it's not really a thing for Americans. That's not part of it for Americans. For Americans, it's just the sport. I'm a soccer fan. And maybe you identify heavily as a soccer fan and you want to be around other soccer fans. But remember that soccer fandom in America is a million different flavors. And it makes it really hard to pull us all together. And I don't even know how we do that. Maybe if the team wins a World Cup, it'll all fix itself. But you don't really want it to have to get there for that to happen, Rob.
I feel like, well, if you look on the women's side, when the women's World Cup victories happened, the back-to-back, and they're expecting some constant windfall for the NWSL. And obviously there has been growth there, but it wasn't just like a light switch where men's national team wins. We're a soccer country with a soccer culture where we don't get outsold anymore. Like, it's hard to believe that it would be as simple as that. I feel like, I mean, is it just ticket by ticket, heart by heart? Probably just like the slow grind.
Yeah, it is. I mean, again, you're talking about something so fundamentally important to the people who show up to support Mexico and Houston that I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm not letting anybody off the hook. I guess if you're a U.S. men's national team fan and you live in the area and you can afford it, you maybe should go to support your team. I guess. I don't know. But again, like there's a gap between supporting Mexico, supporting Guatemala, supporting El Salvador, supporting many other countries in the United States for the people who do care about those teams and the people who support the U.S. men's national team. It's a very different flavor of support, of fandom. And again, because there's the national sport of Mexico is soccer. The national sport of Guatemala is soccer. The national sport of Brazil is soccer. The national sport of, pick a country. Right. And any of those countries who have a significant population of people who identify as that, who live in the United States, they're going to show up and they're going to support their team. And you could obviously like grade the fans and say, well, the Mexican fans are better than the U.S. men's national team fans. I'm not sure that that's the right way to look at it. Like, I don't think it's fair to judge U.S. men's national team fans on the same standards that Mexico fans are judged, because again, that's an identity. That's something you're born with. For the most part, you're not born with U.S. men's national team fandom. It's not that important to us. You're born an Alabama fan. You're born a Michigan fan. Maybe you're born a Denver Broncos fan. That's your boy over here. But you're not born a U.S. men's national team fan in most cases. You should be, maybe, and we should get there, but not in most cases.
Yeah, it's probably a pretty small club, like sons of staff members or players or something. That's like very much the inside group, the inside of the bubble. That's probably
Rob,
the only ones that born into
this
it.
Is a thing that will get better with time, right? But it feels like 40 years should be enough, but it really isn't when you consider that where the U.S. men's national team has been over the course of those 40 years.
Yeah, it's a generational situation, it would seem, for that sort of thing, because how many people are first digging into soccer since 2012, since the NBC thing happened? There's more first-time watchers now since then, and then so if those people that are watching that, their kids grew up watching it, so maybe that is the soccer generation, the children of the people that were watching it in the 2010s when it first hit the TV. But we could go on probably seemingly forever on this topic, but we should probably call it for the moment. Thank you for everyone for jumping into the chat. There lots of conversations going on to the side of us. Ron Patel, one of our most keenest supporters. What a great comment to end the day on. That was fantastic.
Yeah, by the way, shout out to Ron and New Mexico United, who just dropped some new looks, new camouflage inspired looks. Go check that out. New Mexico United.
Yeah, and you can check that out, but you can also support us. Thank you. We added a couple new members during the show. Thank you, Crispy Doo, and I think Alan. And if there's another one, forgive me, but thank you for joining. We may have hit 2,800 subscribers during the show. We'll check afterwards, and then so you can subscribe if you haven't already, and then become a member. $3.99 a month. It gets you priority commenting on the shows, gets you access to the Discord, which has been very lively. I have to update the local thread as we're all the way out in Kalamazoo. Water, like a flash flood, just like one storm rolled through Kalamazoo, Michigan, and the people who drove like 2-3 hours out there did not get to see a game. But my phone is blowing up next to me because apparently in tradition of amateur soccer, the game's tonight.
Gotta get it in. Got to get it in. You don't have any other dates available. Got to get it in. Absolutely.
Got to get it in. So look at the local thread on the Morning Kick Around Discord server. You'll get some more info in there. Thank you everyone for commenting. You can also support on coffee.com/morning kick around. We got a specific goal there for on-site, in-person segment there. If we were not able to raise the funds there. You're just laughing at me because I've got like a bugaboo with how to describe how to meet up together.
A show on location in 2026. We were raising money to do a show on location in 2026, Rob.
There we go. So we're back on Wednesday. We're going to talk AV Alta and probably talk some Club World Cup and whatever may come in these busy times that we have. So until then, everybody be safe and enjoy your soccer. Thank you.